Hi, beautiful mamas, and welcome back to the Yoga Bellies and Babies podcast video edition. Today's episode is so special because I'm going to tell you about my birth story, about my third and fourth, technically, birth stories, which is the birth of my twins over a year ago. But I've been wanting to share this because I use hypnobirthing. Of course, if you've been following me, you know that I've used hypnobirthing for my previous two births, and I use it for the twins. But this time, I used it in hospital with an induction. Hypnobirthing journey has been quite the evolution from just reading a book with one baby and an induction to having a home birth with a second baby to now a third and fourth induction with twins. I want to show you how this worked, how this is possible, and share the birth story because birth stories are so valuable and it's such a powerful way of passing down the message from one mother to another. So I hope you enjoy and let's dive in.
Hi there. Welcome to the Yoga Bellies and Babies podcast. I'm your host, Krishna Hasamal, a mama of 4, a yoga teacher, and a scientist. I'm here to help you learn about the journey of pregnancy, birth, and parenthood through yoga, science, and most importantly, personal experiences. Each week, I'll talk to parents, science and healthcare professionals, and of course, yogis. You'll learn about the nitty-gritty details of pregnancy and birth, the ups and downs of postpartum, and the very unglamorous life of being a parent. And now, let's get to it.
So my hypnobirthing journey has been quite an evolution. From my first baby, who was now 6, someone gave me a book. I borrowed the book. I read the book. I was a yoga teacher. I was a prenatal yoga teacher. I was like, yeah, how hard can this be? I read the book, took the notes, understood it all in my head, went ahead. Yeah, it did not turn out the way I was hoping it turned out. That's another podcast episode, which you can look at another time. The second time, I wanted to go for a home birth because I tried with the first and it didn't happen. And then I knew, okay, I understood the hypnobirthing techniques. I knew they worked. They made complete sense in my mind, but I hadn't embodied them. I hadn't practiced them enough. So from about 4 months or 5 months onwards, I practiced. I took the full course on top of reading the book. I took the full course. I practiced every single night with my partner. And it was amazing. It was the most beautiful, empowering, magical experience. Yes, it was intense because birth is intense. It's an intense, life-changing experience, but it wasn't painful. It was powerful. It was intense. Maybe it was pain. I don't know how to describe it, but it wasn't like an ouch pain. It was just pure intensity and power coming through my body. So then when it came to the twins, and I have to say, having a twin pregnancy is definitely very different to a singleton pregnancy, extremely different. Not just the pregnancy and what happens to the body in terms of the demands that are put on mom, but the way you're treated. The setting is different. You go from any chance of having a home birth, you go straight to medicalized. And in our case, our twins were sharing one placenta, which meant that we were even more medicalized in the sense that we were placed as high risk. And the only reason we were high risk was that. It wasn't to do with my age or my condition or the pregnancy itself. It was the fact that there was 2 babies, 1 placenta, high risk. Babies are healthy, that's fine, but that meant they wanted me to come in and get checked and get scans at least every 2 weeks. You get more scans, you get pushed towards having an induction quite early on. So it's a completely different setting. But I knew that I could still use hypnobirthing because you can use hypnobirthing for anything, for any type of birth, from a home birth to a C-section. It works. Now, I need to give you some background onto why hypnobirthing was so important for me. And it's because my firstborn was through an induction. I was 42 weeks pregnant. There was no signs of baby. Nothing was happening. So I couldn't have a home birth with her. So I had to go into hospital and I had a very long induction. She was born after about 24 hours of having an oxytocin drip, after having an episiotomy, after having morphine, after having a fever, an infection. Anyway, it was physically excruciating because my first experience of an induction was going from nothing, feeling nothing in my body in terms of labor, to feeling full-blown contractions every 2 minutes. And that's intense because the body's not supposed to do that. The body is gradually builds up, right? When you have natural contractions, like I did with my second child, which was a home birth, you feel it slowly every couple of hours and it's gradual. It's like the body warms up to it. But when you don't, it just hits you and you go from 0 to 100, and for a very, very long time. So I had that fear in my head that this induction with the twins was going to be the same, because it was very likely that I was going to have an induction with the twins. There was a lot of pressure for different reasons, which I'm not going to go into, to get them out between 36 and 37 weeks. And I'm not going to go into the details, but long story short, I agreed to go in for an induction at 37 weeks. I had studied and researched and I knew all my options. I'd weighed all the pros and cons, all the risks, all the benefits, all the stuff that we're taught in this amazing hypnobirthing course. It's not just about the tools, it's really about understanding all your options and making the decision that's best for you and baby within the circumstances of that time. So we decided we're going to do it. We're going to do the induction at 37 weeks. But my fear was not about the birth. I had zero fear about the birth. My fear was of the actual induction because of my first experience. So I'm so glad that even for the twin birth, I used hypnobirthing. And again, I started around 5 months. I wish I started earlier, but the first trimester was shock. When most people who find out they're pregnant with twins, first trimester is a bit of a roller coaster of emotions. So I was in shock for the first trimester. I wasn't really thinking. It's only until about week 20 of the twin pregnancy that I was like, okay, we need to get into the mindset now. We're going to have these babies somehow or the other. We don't know how they're going to come out. With twins, there's always a higher risk of C-section. Some doctors really like to go for C-sections. I advocated for myself and I changed medical institutions halfway through my pregnancy. I went more to a midwife-led hospital and they were very encouraging of being able to have a vaginal birth of the twins. So I did my best to put everything I knew into practice. I retook the hypnobirthing course. I reread the book for the third time. We did all the breathing exercises, the visualizations, the guided relaxations every single night. Me and my partner would go to sleep with them every single night. And again, it was a completely different experience this time, not just because it was twins, but because the stress or the fear was different. Right? With my first baby, there was this unknown and it was a bit of like ignorance is bliss. I'll be able to do it. It'll be fine. I'll just go with what my body says. And it kind of didn't work out the way I wanted. With the second, it was a home birth. I completely trusted in myself. I completely trusted my midwife, but still there was that element of we're going to go for the home birth. At any point, we might need to move over to the hospital. With the twins, it was really the induction. It was this deep fear of having an induction because I had already gone through an induction and already known how incredibly uncomfortable, painful, intense, long it was and what an induction means, right? In my case, my induction led to various chain of events that ended up with a episiotomy and my baby having to come out with a ventos. And it wasn't ideal. And I had this thing in my head, in my body, those memories coming back, and I didn't want to repeat that. The midwives, the gynecologists, everyone reassured me that every induction is different. And it's true. Every induction is different. Every body is different. Every pregnancy is different. Even the same person, the same woman having birth first, second, third, fourth time, it's different. They reassured me that the induction I was going to have with the twins didn't necessarily have to be the same induction I had with my firstborn. Now, the juicy stuff. So with inductions, generally it's pre-planned, like it might be pre-planned with a cesarean. We checked into hospital on a Monday night, knowing that our babies were going to come out on Tuesday. Because in Spain, the protocol is different to the Netherlands. In Spain, once you start the induction, you've got 12 hours. And if the baby is not out in 12 hours, it has to come out with a C-section. So I felt that pressure of like, oh my God, they're going to be induced and I need to get the babies need to be out in 12 hours. If not, I'm going to end up in a C-section and blah, blah, blah. And I started spiraling, but I kept coming back and my husband kept bringing back the hypnobirthing techniques and he kept bringing me the relaxations and we just kept going back and back. And it was like a kind of a back and forth, right? You spiral into worst case scenario and then you go back and then you spiral and then you go back and you keep having the tools to go back check in. And each time, the time you stay calm becomes longer and the time you spiral into panic becomes shorter. So we meet the gynecologist that's on duty. They go through our birth plan, which was amazing because they wanted to talk about our birth plan the night before the birth. They understood where I was coming from. I'd specified in there, I'd use hypnobirthing. I'd use this method of hypnobirthing, which was KG hypnobirthing, which is not very popular in Spain. They hadn't really heard of it. I'd specified, I know we're in a medical setting. I'd like the lights dimmed. I'd like the sounds to be as quiet as possible. I'd like to play my music. I want to put my essential oil, all that kind of stuff. Sure, no problem. So that evening, the induction started by putting in prostaglandins, some hormones inside to try and stimulate things. And that night was very difficult to sleep. So we were sent up to the maternity ward to rest as much as possible, but I found it extremely hard to sleep. It was a mixture of nerves and again replaying that induction fear that I knew I was going to be induced in a few hours. I was going to have an induction. I was going to have a drip in me within a few hours. And I was scared that the pain of the induction was going to be the same as it was the first time around. I wasn't scared of the birth, the pain of the labor, because I knew that's intense. I knew how to transform that natural pain that the body gives you when it's in natural labor. But I couldn't control the pain or the sensations that come in through artificial hormones, right? That's something external that's controlled by a drip. It's not my body. But I did my best. I kept playing the relaxations. I was bouncing on the ball all night. I was starting to feel some cramps through the hormones that had been put inside because of the induction. I kept feeling babies, and I had my birth song going on, which was a sea shanty going on in the head, and I was bouncing on my ball as much as I could. And there was also this inner debate going on at the same time of, I hope I'm doing the best thing for my babies by having an induction. I knew I had done my research and I'd made this decision very carefully, but still there's that inner debate. We know babies are better in for as long as possible if everything's fine, of course. If you need to come out, then of course babies need to come out. But in my case, everything seemed fine, but still there's risks with twins, which I'm not going to go into here. And that little thing of like, oh, I hope I've done the right thing. And I think that's just mom guilt. And I think we educate ourselves, we try and understand and digest all the information as we can. We make the best decision we can based on the information we have at that time. And we have to go with it and we have to trust our instinct. And again, I use the same techniques to kind of say, we've made this decision, we're going ahead, and that's it. Because it was the first time that I'd actually chosen the birth date for my babies. And part of me was like, I wonder how long they'd stay inside for if we weren't going to induce them. I wonder when they would come out. Would it be soon? Would it be in another 2 weeks? Anyway, so those kind of thoughts kept me up at night, but I kept going. I kept using the breath, and I kept, especially the guided relaxations. I just kept playing different ones, especially the ones for releasing fear and the ones for building confidence. That's the one I needed. I needed not so much the calming ones, but I needed the ones for confidence and power. And they really did the trick. So the next morning, wake up, we get moved down to the labor ward, and I get given the biggest room next to the operating theater, just in case, because there's a chance that you need to go for a C-section with twins. There's a higher risk, so just in case. And again, it doesn't help when you know that they've given you the room that's right next to the operating theater. But it was so helpful, again, to just go back. Positive mindset, affirmations, go back. Don't think of the emergency doors that are there. So it was time to get connected to the IV drip, which is not comfortable, let's be honest, right? Nobody wants to be connected to that IV drip. And the head midwife came by. She was not going to be my main midwife, but she came by to give me words of encouragement. She'd read my birth plan. She was fully supportive of me using hypnobirthing for the twins. She knew I'd be able to do it. She knew about my fear of the pain from the induction, and she reassured me that not every induction is the same. My body knows what it's doing, to trust my body, and that just trust the fact that it doesn't have to be the same experience as it was before. And those were really reassuring words. And everybody came by to introduce themselves, which was really nice. I actually wrote that in my birth plan as well. I want to know the team. So the 2 gynecologists who were going to be there for that shift came in. They were not going to be there for the whole of the labor, for the first and second stage. They were only going to come at the birth because it was the midwives who were going to be with me. And they came in, they introduced themselves, and they were like, if you have any questions, let us know. We'll see you when it's time to get the babies out. And then I had my 2 midwives who were going to be with me during that shift. It was all very open and honest and clear from the beginning, and they understood that I didn't need them there with me the whole time. They would just come in and out and pop in and pop out and check. They dimmed the lights for me. They closed the doors. They tried to keep things as quiet as possible. Came in every hour or so to check on the oxytocin, gradually increase it, ask if I needed anything. It was very, very respectful. My partner was there with me all the time. I wish I could have had my mother as well. But in Spain, for whatever reason, you're not allowed. I hate that term, but you could only have one person. In the birth of my daughter here in the Netherlands, I had my mother and my partner, and that was good. It was good for them. It's good for them because it can be very tiring for the birth partner as well. So if you have a second person, they can take turns supporting mom. That can be very helpful. Whereas when labor started kicking in and I started feeling all the rushes and the contractions, and that's when I needed my partner, I needed my husband there to lead me through those waves. And then he had to go to the toilet, so he had to go to eat. And I'd be like, you can't now. There's a rush coming. There's a contraction coming. There's a wave coming. You have to be here with me through the wave. And he knew that, right? So he'd have to take his breaks or run to the toilet or reply messages to our family whilst I was in the spaces in between those waves. So I really wish I could have had a second person there. But anyway, my mother was with my other kids, so that was also really useful. I didn't feel like eating at all. I did really want to change positions. So I did go from the birthing ball to the bed to standing. There was a lot of that, going from birthing ball to bed to standing, because the drip started around 10 o'clock in the morning and things started kicking in around 2, really kicking in, really starting to feel it. And it was gradual. It was completely different to my first experience of an induction. And that is where I felt grateful for that fact that not every birth is the same. Not every induction is the same. Not every labor is the same. It was the same drug being put into me through an IV drip, but it was completely different reaction in my body. And I don't know how much hypnobirthing had to do with this. I don't know if it's that my body was responding so well to it that it was also helping bringing in natural oxytocin in. That's a question I wondered to myself. So moving, I really enjoyed moving from changing positions. It was a bit harder this time because, of course, I had lots of cables on my belly. When you have an induction, they need to monitor the babies, so they put cables connecting your belly to a machine. In this case, I had double the amount because I had 2 babies. And every time I moved, it was just really hard to follow them. So if I moved too much, then something would come loose and they'd lose one of the baby's heartbeats. So a midwife or a nurse would have to come in and readjust. And of course, I knew they preferred me to stay still because it did mess up the cables and they wouldn't lose a heartbeat here and there. But they also understood that if I have to move, I have to move. So they were patient and they understood and they could see that what I was doing was helping. So that was really good because I also knew how to communicate with them and they could see that and they could communicate back with me. I know at one point I just really wanted to go into water. It helped me incredibly for my first birth, for my second birth, being under the shower, being in a bathtub. In the Netherlands, I had the technology, whereas even though I was hooked up during an induction, I could still go in and use water. Here in Spain, that was not an option. Unfortunately, and this is something I really think that hospitals need to work better on, is giving water as an option to mums who are having an induction. You're hooked up to cables, that's fine, but we have the technology in there. You could still go into a bath or into a shower. So my body craved having warm water on my back. It craved sitting in a bathtub. I didn't have that. So I had to do other stuff. And when the contractions or the rushes, I call them waves, contraction is quite a harsh word, started getting more frequent, that's when we knew things really had to start kicking in. And that's where our practice came into action because my birth partner, that's when the birth partner has to take control, because I kind of went into my own zone. I was really in my bubble, feeling things. And that's where my partner had to look at me and see what I needed. And there's no time for him to start taking the book and trying to, oh, shall I read her this or shall I read her that? It doesn't work like that. So he has to know, and I'd be like, okay. And I would just point at my lower back and he'd know, come and press on the lower back. And we'd practice this other thing where he uses his hands to go up my back and down my back. And while we were practicing, it felt really nice. But during labor at this particular time, it didn't feel nice at all. So I could just say, no, like back, and point at him and he would know. The fact that we'd practiced meant I didn't have to use my energy. I didn't have to use my words. I didn't have to go into that logical mindset and start explaining what I needed, what I wanted. And then we kept moving from thing to thing. We kept moving from that to the breathing, especially during a wave. The up breath is just extremely, extremely helpful. We'd practice, again, about 5 or 6 different visualizations to go with that breath, to go with the idea of opening, rising, and expanding. And I told him what visualizations work for me and which ones don't. I like the idea of visualizing a hot air balloon rising up into the air. And then as I breathe in and as I would breathe out, that hot air balloon would just like float away. Those ones worked for me. There were some other ones that didn't work for me. So he would just repeat the same ones that worked for me over and over and over again during that contraction. And then we'd come out. I would rest in between waves, in between rushes. I would make sure I rested. I'd either rest on him or on the ball or on the bed, and then again and go back. So we used a lot of the up breaths. We used a little song which is like, baby's on the way, baby's on the way. We used that for the first one, for the second one. This time it was babies are on their way. Babies are on their way. And you repeat that a few times and it takes you through the contraction. And around 4 p.m, something turned. Something shifted. I suddenly had to go to the toilet. And I tried a few times. And every time I tried, it was this big operation because I had the ECGs connected to my belly. We'd have to go with the IV drip and with the ECG and take it all off and take it on. And it was the midwives who realized, because of course, I had so many cables around me that I couldn't go to the toilet on my own. I needed them to come disconnect me and then reconnect me. And they were like, okay, are you sure you really need to go to the toilet? Because I was going on the toilet, nothing was coming out, but I felt like I had to. And I was in this baby bubble. I was in such a baby bubble that I myself didn't realize, okay, maybe this is a transition. Maybe I'm moving on to the next stage of labor here. I had no idea. Bear in mind that in the last few hours, I'd even just spent some time just lying in bed, relaxing, breathing through it. I was not in my head. I was in a bubble. My logic, my brain wasn't working at that point. I can't even remember actually if they did a check for me to see how dilated I was or wasn't. That's the state I was in. Yes, I had a drip on me that was giving me the oxytocin, but I was not out there. I was in this little baby bubble is the only way I can explain it, like a birth bubble. I wasn't really aware of things that were happening around me at that point, which in hindsight is a sign that, yeah, it was time to transition. And that's where everything switched, because that's when we went from quiet, just my birth partner and me, because the midwives were just coming in and out to check on us and leaving. They were not really with us from like 10 to 4 p.m. They were just coming in, checking and going away, which is what I'd asked for in the birth plan. But now it was time to get the babies out, and everything switched. Because it's twins and because it's high risk, a whole team had to come and had to be present. And I knew this, but I wasn't fully aware of what this meant for the actual birth. So the midwives had to inform the gynecologists. So suddenly 2 of them come in with twins. There's 2 gynecologists. Then the door keeps opening and closing, and these assistants keep coming in with these trays with all these instruments. going to the door. I don't know. I was on one end of the room and they kept walking in and out. Two assistants chatting away really loudly. Of course, the lights have to come on now because there's more people in the room. They need to see stuff. And then there was a really tall man with a beard. I remember him just standing there. He was trying to be invisible, but he was very visible to me. He was just this tall, a big man standing, and I just remember his beard and him being quiet, standing with his arm crossed, just looking, not saying anything. And I was suddenly become very aware of this stranger in my room. This person hadn't introduced himself to me. I had no idea who he was. And then I realized that I just became very aware. I realized my bubble had burst. I was becoming very aware of all these people suddenly in the birth room with me. Then I realized there was a secret door next to my bed, which I was supposed to birth on. And that door had some activity behind it. And then I realized, oh, that's the emergency, the pediatric bit, right? Where they're going to take the babies. If there's something wrong with the babies, there's a whole emergency team. There's the pediatricians that are waiting there on the other side of the door for the babies to come out. Oh my God, all these people are here waiting for me to give birth. And then the real full-on final stage contractions started coming in and I started getting sciatica. And I was like, this cannot be happening. This just cannot be happening. And there was waves of sharp nerve pain going from my hip all the way down to my leg. These cramps, electricity shooting down one side of my leg, my right hip, which is the one that tends to flare up. And it'd been fine all this time. And then suddenly I was getting shooting pains down my leg. And that's where I almost broke down. I thought, you must be joking. I've reached to this point, no epidural, no painkillers, nothing. I've been managing it perfectly well, just with hypnobirthing. And now I get sciatica and my whole, that positive, beautiful, warm bubble just kind of burst. And it was like labor was taking a few step backs. And this is what happens when we've taken out of that safe mode. This can happen. And I knew this can happen and it was happening. And at that point I was like, no. And I didn't want to spiral into, okay, we need to get the babies out. Otherwise our time's going to run out and they're going to wheel me into a C-section just because I have sciatica. This can't be happening. But again, I thought maybe it happens. A part of me thought, it's okay. It's okay. So I kept kind of going back and forth, but I did get a bit nervous. I started to panic. The midwives noticed, the gynecologist noticed, and he turned around to the assistants who were walking up and down and chatting about their day and told them to keep quiet. I started sweating a lot, and it was out of nerves. And the gynecologist was very reassuring. He's like, it's okay. We have time. It's like he could read my mind. He knew that I knew that we had 12 hours during the induction. And I was going back and forth. I was entering this logic state of Krishna. I had come out of physical, maternal, raw animal state, and I was entering the logic state where I was thinking about, why do I have sciatica? What can I do about it? What happens if we don't get the babies out in time? All this kind of stuff. And they were like, they could read my mind, they could read my body, and they said, just relax. We have plenty of time. There's no rush. Everyone's here. You don't have to worry. And I remember telling my midwife, I'm like, but everyone's come in here. I've told them I'm ready to have the baby. Everyone's come in now to help me have the baby. And the baby is not coming out because I have sciatica. What can we do about it? So we tried different positions. We tried on the ball. We tried on all fours. We tried on the bed. We tried standing. They had ropes in the room. Nothing worked. The sciatica pain just was so intense. And I remember the gynecologist saying, it's okay, it's normal that you have this sciatica. Look at what your hips have done throughout the pregnancy and throughout labor. It's okay. So that's when I asked for some pain relief. I said, what can you give me? I had signed authorization for epidural in case I'd wanted it. I hadn't needed it at this point. So I said, will an epidural help? And the truth is that nobody knew. And they were like, okay, let's see if we can find out. And the midwife knew that I was panicking, and she's like, your bubble has burst, hasn't it? You're out of that zone. I said, yes. No, she knew I had been out of that zone. So she and the gynecologist had a word, and he immediately kicked everybody out of the room. He told everybody to leave, and he said, don't worry, just rest. They could see that labor had gone back. It literally like retracted, as if the babies had said, no, this doesn't feel good for us. We're not coming out right now. And we kind of had to pause it. And I did feel a bit guilty. I'm like, I've called everybody in here to give birth because I'm ready to give birth. The whole team has stopped everything they're doing. They've come in to attend me and the twins, and now nothing's happening. And the midwife she could read my mind. She's like, forget about everybody else. Just breathe. Just you and your breathe. You've been doing so well up till now. Just keep doing what you're doing. They didn't know exactly what I was doing because it was in English as well. And I think they're not used to seeing a person in such a medicalized setting using these techniques. But she was just like, let's get you back into that bubble. So as one midwife helps me back onto the bed to help me rest, the other midwife is going through my paperwork, calling the anesthesiologist, trying to find out if epidural will help with sciatica, if there's anything they can do. So I was on my bed, resting. My body had completely shut down. And I was with the midwife that had been with me since the morning. She could tell I was frustrated. She could tell that I had put so much loving effort into having the most amazing birth. And I was okay with the idea of having a C-section. But I didn't want to have a C-section because of freaking sciatica. But anyway, that's besides the point, right? I was just frustrated at the whole situation. My body had shut down. My body had just completely shut down the moment that all those people walked into the room. And that was quite frustrating, having to think, okay, let's start again. But thankfully, I had the tools and my partner kept coming back. And again, it's that keep coming back to the practice, keep coming back to the tools. They get you through it, and they really do, because the moment I lie down on my bed, within 5 minutes of being back, of being on my bed and resting, a roar came out of me. Just this animal like this deep sound was coming out of me. And I knew that was it. And I'd found this position. I was lying on my side. So my right hip was the one with the pain, from my right hip down to my right leg. I was lying on my right of the bed. The bed was a little bit inclined, so I wasn't horizontal. I was kind of up. My husband was near my head, holding my hands, and the midwife was by my legs. And she was like, okay. She didn't say anything, but we knew. And she didn't have to call anybody because they heard me. My roaring was so loud and so deep that they heard me. And this time, everybody came in and they stayed on the other side of the room, so to my back. And I was lying on my right, facing a wall, facing my husband, facing the midwife, and I just blocked everybody out. And between the two of them, they helped me block everybody out. I knew that there were going to be people there, but they were just there. And I lied on my side and I roared, and it just came, and the pushes just came. And within a few breaths, a few pushes, baby one came out. And it was like, whoa, like this sigh of relief. Like that sciatica pain somehow had gone. My body was back into the zone. It was like magic. Everything like working together again. We didn't cut the cord immediately. We let the cord pulse. Baby was placed on me. I turned onto my back. One of the ECGs could come out because one of the babies was out. So it meant less cables. The oxytocin was pulled out of me as well. So another arm was free. It was like this liberating moment of like, oh my God, we've done it. We've given birth to a baby. So my husband then was called once they let I'm getting emotional again now. The cord stopped pulsing, and after a few minutes, my husband cut the cord, the placenta cord of the first baby. And then I had baby on my chest while I was lying on my back. Gynecologist said, let's check baby number 2, see if he's still in position with his head down. And if he is, if that's okay, we're going to try and get him out as soon as possible. This is something we talked about earlier in the day. But again, they just, I think, felt the need to remind me. And I had agreed on that. Again, a whole load of decision making behind what to do with baby number 2. But I'd done my research and I'd agreed, yes, let's get baby number 2 out as soon as we can. They checked. Baby number 2 was also head down, ready in position with my consent, broke the membranes, broke the waters, and then boom, it started. Within a few minutes, the same urges came, the same feeling to push came. The pediatricians took baby number 1 for some checks while I was ready to push for baby number 2. So now my husband had gone with baby number 1, and he was like, what should I do? Should I stay with you? Should I go? And I was like, no, go with baby number 1. I was so comfortable with my midwife. I was like, I'll stay. I've got her. It's fine. And for whatever reason, baby number 2 has higher risks, which I'm not going to go into now. And the gynecologist had asked me, if possible, that they want baby number 2 to come out while I'm lying on my back. And I had said, I'm not going to guarantee you anything. But they had said, again, for whatever reason, baby number 1 can come out in whatever position you want. But baby number 2, they want baby number 2 to come on my back. And I looked at him, and I knew this. And I said, I want to do exactly the same thing as I did for baby number 1, for baby number 2. And he's like, go ahead, do what you need to do. It's like we had this trust, right? And I did exactly the same thing. I was like, this works. It felt good for me. It felt good for my body. I turned onto my side. Midwife was holding my legs, one leg on her shoulder and pushing my legs into her body. And she was pushing her body back into my legs. It was like a side squat, if you want to think of it that way, with my knees up. And I felt no sciatica pain at all. I don't know if it was there or if it wasn't there. And then it came again. This sudden, like, I can't even replicate it now. These deep animal mooing, cow mooing sounds. I don't know how to describe it, but it just came. I roared. They guided me a little bit, but it just, within 2 or 3 pushes, baby number 2 came out. It was like same thing, 13 minutes later, 13 minutes apart, like a deja vu. Turned on my back, they put baby number 2 on me. My husband was now holding baby number 1. Everything was fine with him. So he was standing there watching me holding a baby, giving birth to another baby. And we let the cord pulse for a bit. And then I said, suddenly I was like, hey, can I cut the cord? And they're like, yeah, sure. I'm like, well, I've given birth to 4 babies now and I've never cut a cord before. He's cut most of them. And they were like, yeah, just do it. So I kind of leaned forward and they helped me and I cut the cord and lied back. And then it was time to get the placenta out. I was lying on my back and I pushed a few times and they helped pull it a little bit gently. And the placenta came out. The placenta was huge. This huge placenta that had fed 2 babies. It was absolutely huge, but it was absolutely beautiful. It was so beautiful. And that's it. And that is how I gave birth to my twins using hypnobirthing during an induction. So a few takeaways from this experience. Not all inductions are the same. So we know that not all pregnancies are the same, not all births are the same, not all inductions are the same. Yes, there's a high percentage of things that happen in the same, and there is a likely chain of events, and there's higher chances that inductions might end up with extra interventions. But the way the body reacts is not always the same. Every birth is unique. Number 2, your environment matters. This was so much proof to me. I was in a hospital setting and I tried to recreate as much as I could the way I did for my home birth. And there's a lot of things. It's internal factors of what you do, but external factors help. Take your favorite smells with you. Take a photo frame. Take your favorite pillow. Take things that give you comfort, that give you security. And this was proof. The moment that my perfect little setting was disrupted, my body stalled, my labor stalled, and it was like, nope, I closed up, and my body responded, right? So the environment helps, whether you're at home, whether you're in a hospital, whether it's a C-section, whether it's an operating theater, the environment helps. Number 3, support. It makes all the difference. I'm so grateful that my husband, my partner, had practiced with me, had trained, had done the courses with me, had read the book. He fell asleep during every single relaxation we played at night, but he knew it. He knew the techniques, and he was there to support me, especially when my brain went off and when my body took over and my logic just switched off. I had him there to know how to guide me. I had him there to guide me through the waves and through the contractions so that I didn't have to use my energy to explain it to anybody. And it's not only the support from your partner, it's support from the healthcare. I had made a conscious effort to switch healthcare providers halfway through my pregnancy, and I'm so glad I did. It was a pain and it's not easy to switch, but I'm so happy I did, and it was worth it. And I had made that conscious effort to explain to the midwives, the team that was going to be there with me, show them my birth plan, go through it, explain to them, have conversations with them, and it was so worth it. Number 4, we have to adapt to our plans. This birth could have turned in a million different directions. Both babies were head down when we went into it. So yes, vaginal births were an option. There's always a chance that first baby comes out through the vagina, second baby might need a C-section. There's always a chance that you don't know. In my case, I might have had a C-section because of sciatica, and I hope that I would have been okay with this. I can't tell what I would have felt like at the moment, but I was prepared for all outcomes. And number 5, trust your instincts. Your instincts are right. If you feel like you need to go to the toilet, go to the toilet. If you feel that something's not right, something's not right. If you start panicking, you start getting nervous, if you can say it, but trust your instincts. Your instinct, it's like when you're pregnant, when you're giving birth, when you're in labor, your instincts are just heightened. Your sensitivity is heightened. And it's thanks to all the hypnobirthing techniques that I was able to get out of my head into my body and really feel what was needed from me at each point in the process, even though I was in a medicalized setting. So what I want you to take away from this story is that hypnobirthing is not about having a specific type of birth. It's about having the tools that work for you in whatever birth setting that you might choose to have, or whatever birth setting that you might end up in. So whether you're planning a home birth or an induction or a C-section, you have the tools. And these tools will help you stay calm and connected. And even though you might spiral and you might get into your head, you have the tools to come out of your head and come back into your body. If you're pregnant and curious about hypnobirthing, I would love to support you. I would love to work with you. Have a look at my course, The Calm and Confident Mama. It's a 4-week hypnobirthing course that gives you all the tools you need to have a calm and confident birth. Check out the details on my website, www.krishyoga.com. And if you have any questions at all, just write to me, DM me on Instagram. I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Yoga, Bellies and Babies podcast. If you like the show, please leave a review. This would mean the world to me. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast to never miss a new episode. To learn more about practicing yoga with me, whether it's one-to-one, a group class, courses or events, or to get instant access to freebies, workshops and more, go to www.krishyoga.com right now. Thanks for tuning in and see you next time.